Sixers. 10, 9, 8, 76ers.
What's going on, everyone? This is UK 76ers. My name is Ben Glasspool, and today we're going to be talking about who the 76ers should appoint as their next head coach. Before we get going, if you could like, subscribe, and share, it'd be greatly appreciated. You can also find me on Twitter at UK76ers, so feel free to drop a follow. As I mentioned in my previous video, this channel is still very much in its formative stages. This by no means is a finished article, and I'm hoping that the quality of these videos will only get better as I get more accustomed to producing videos. So that being said, without further ado, let's get going. So if some of you guys still don't know, Brett Brown has been fired after being embarrassingly swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round of this year's playoffs. The Sixers front office now have begun the hunt for his replacement, hoping they can find someone who can get us back on track in our pursuit of an NBA championship. Well, it's not even just an NBA championship, just being competitive, getting past the second round, but I digress. Whilst it's important to bring in a coach capable of getting us to the finals, other considerations do have to be made. Can we get a coach who'll work well with the front office? You see it all the time before. Often coaches in front offices can clash. They don't get on well, and then nothing gets achieved. Can a coach bring out the best of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons? This is a huge deal. If they can't do that, then there's no point bringing them in. Will they get on with those stars as well? You've seen sometimes coaches can galvanize stars and really get them going, and you've seen the polar opposite as well. Can they develop players? And I think when you say this, people often think, oh, you're talking about the young guys, talking about Matisse, talking about Shake. Whilst I am talking about those, it's also those little marginal gains that you can get out of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. They're not the finished articles yet. They can get better, but they need someone that can push them that one step further. So earlier this week, Jay Wright unfortunately ruled himself out of the running for the job. Those of you who know me, who follow me on Twitter, know that I was getting quite ahead of myself and that I wanted Jay Wright to leave Villanova to come to the Sixers. And I let myself get too excited on that one because it was never happening, was it? But that's just endless disappointment in Philadelphia. But who knows? Maybe this next coach could be the guy we're after. But before I examine these candidates, I just want to give out some honorable mentions. So Jerry Stackhouse, Becky Hammond, Sam Cassell, and Wes Unseld Jr. They've been loosely linked to the job, these guys. And whilst I don't doubt that they'll soon break into the NBA and just be fantastic in their trade, I think this one's a bit too soon for them, and I can't quite see it. So the first coach we're going to put under the microscope is former Golden State Warriors head coach and a former All-Star point guard, Mark Jackson. As a player, Jackson spent 17 years in the NBA and is fourth on the all-time list for assists. During his time in the Bay Area, he oversaw the development of Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry, with Steph making his first All-Star appearance during Jackson's third and final season with the Warriors. He garnered the respect and admiration of superstars like Curry, and with Jackson's experience as a point guard, the hope would be that he can take Ben Simmons under his wing like he did with Steph and take him out of his shell and get him to that next level. Jackson's teams became renowned for playing hard night in, night out, especially on the defensive end. The Warriors went from a bottom 5 defensive rating in 2011 to a top 5 defensive rating in 2014. Their record, in addition to this, improved every single season, peaking with a 51-win season in 2014. The Sixers' defense statistically hasn't been that bad, but we all know, and we've seen, that they switch off on nights, normally when they're playing down to opponents. But if Jackson became our coach, this wouldn't happen. He would never let this happen. The intensity will have to maintain itself every single game, whether you're playing the Lakers or the Cavs. It's got to be the same. So with Jackson having a record that improved every season, his offense was still quite static and very ISO-reliant. Often Steph Curry had to bail them out with his just incredible shot creation and ability to create his own shot, but the Sixers don't have a player that can do that. You know, we don't have any guard, not even a B-Tech version of Curry that can do that. We don't have anything that can do. Anyone can do that. And if we don't have anyone who can do that, we're not going to get far in a Jackson offense. But in addition to that, whilst he had Curry to bail him out, it still did underperform. And it does often, when I looked at the film and when I looked at what Jackson's offense did, it reminded me a lot of Brett Brown. It was his offense. It was stagnant and static. and it just simply underperformed. He had two generational talents in Steph and Clay, but only ranked 12th in offensive rating in 2014. And as soon as Jackson left and Steve Kerr took over, this leapt up to second in the league in offensive rating. It just clearly showed the drawbacks of Jackson's offensive style. And if he got Steph and Clay to underperform that much, what would he do with Joel and Ben, who aren't even half the scorers that they are? So, God forbid how that would look if he became the new Sixers coach. Jackson was also quite a large personality. He clashed with a lot of personnel surrounding the organization, from players to owners. His intensity and overly emotional behavior can win over many. Everyone loves to see passion, but it can also annoy a lot of others. And if you have big personalities, too many big personalities, there'll undoubtedly be clashes. And we've already got one in Joel Embiid. I don't think the Sixers can afford to put themselves in such a precarious position. Everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction, and under Jackson, we can't guarantee this. So for me, Mark Jackson is a no. Next up, we're going to look at the former Brooklyn Nets coach, Kenny Atkinson. Atkinson has been jobless since he stepped down in March of this year, but he's also been touted for plenty of jobs within the NBA. Before taking the role of head coach at the Nets, Jackson was an assistant with the Hawks and the Knicks, and throughout both of these stints as an assistant, he became known as a player development coach, a talent he brought with him to Brooklyn. After Brooklyn signed off on the awful, I mean, you know the trade I'm talking about, the infamously awful trade which saw them receive Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce in return for 4 first-round picks, the Nets' future looked bleak. But Atkinson's ability to develop and improve players allowed the Nets to make the playoffs for the last 2 seasons, after it had previously seemed that they had struggled for years to come after finishing with a record of 28 and 54 in the 17-18 season. Much of their success last season can be attributed to the likes of Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Jarrett Allen, and Atkinson's ability to improve these players. But most notably is Atkinson's ability to get the best out of D'Angelo Russell, which caught the headlines, and understandably so. D'Lo performed at an exceptional level in Atkinson's side, resulting in his first call-up to the All-Star team. This came after a period where many had given up on Russell. Atkinson's ability to galvanize and improve players allowed him to create great relationships with his team. He's no pushover either, with something which many accuse Brett Brown of being. He's hard on his players when the moment demands him to be, but he also keeps his players happy and keeps those relationships intact, which is just crucial, especially if you're dealing with big stars. He's helped create a good culture in Brooklyn, which laid down the groundwork for them to land KD and Kyrie in free agency. And bearing in mind beforehand, they were almost a laughing stock. You know, people thought they were going nowhere. And before you know it, they've got 2 of the best players in the league playing for them. And that's predominantly down to Atkinson, you've got to say. So we talk about how he built good relationship with his players, but this is specific to point guards as well. He had Jeremy Lin in New York, and he had Jeff Teague in Atlanta, and then he had Russell and Dinwiddie. And we've seen all of these players improve greatly. For the Sixers, this bodes well, especially if you can develop a relationship with Simmons and make him into the special player we know he can be. He managed to turn the Nets into the 8th best defense in the league, despite not having a great deal of top-class wing defenders too. It'll be really intriguing to see what he can do with the defensive options the Sixers has. I mean, Simmons, obviously, if Jay Rich stays, that's if he doesn't get traded. And it would be hard to see the Sixers getting worse at defense, but under Atkinson, it would definitely be improving to a level which I don't think we would have seen before. But the main drawback I find with Atkinson is he who we need right now? There's no doubt he's a great coach. I mean, just look at what I've just reeled off for you. But he's better suited to teams that are aiming to rebuild and improve. Organizations where the pressure of expectancy doesn't weigh on you during every single game. Philly fans are unforgiving, and, rightly or wrongly, they won't be patient. Atkinson is yet to improve himself as someone who can work well with stars. He had Kyrie, and before you know it, Atkinson had left the building. Whether or not that's to do with his handling of Kyrie remains to be seen, but you can have a good guess. So can he deal with Joel? Can he deal with Ben? Can he deal with the heat of pressure and expectancy that comes with taking a Sixer job? I mean, I don't know. But if I was him, the Bulls job just looks so much more attractive, and to be frank, just seems to suit him better. So that's Kenny Atkinson. So the third candidate, and the final one we're going to be looking at in this video, is Ty Lue. It seems as if the writing's on the wall that Ty Lue will be the next Sixers head coach. I mean, there have been so many links. Many have revealed that talks have taken place and there is mutual interest between the two parties. For most Sixer fans, the big question regarding Lue is, well, how good is he? And this might sound obvious, but he's won an NBA title, sure, but how much of that is down to his tactical nous, or how much is it down to the brilliance of the second greatest player of all time? Emphasize second greatest player of all time, LeBron James. Simply put, there's no way to answer that question. You can only really guess at it. So if he's a point that you just got to hope the Cavs' ability to go deep in the playoffs consistently under Lue was largely influenced by his ability to coach at an extremely high level. People will say he's a good coach as he's been able to be assistant to another great coach in Doc Rivers in both Boston and LA. But if assistants were always as good as their head coaches, then we would still have Brett Brown because he'd be the second coming of Greg Popovich. So I'm not sure how much stock to put into the whole assistant argument. But what else can he bring to the table? What do we know that Ty Lue can bring to this team? After Josh Richardson's remarks claiming that this team needs to be more accountable, Lue can bring in a culture which ensures that everyone involved in the organization is accountable for their actions. Too often under Brown, players are able to coast and get away with not giving maximum effort. Lue will not let this happen, and has even been known to stand up to the likes of LeBron if he feels he can be doing more, which he did. He stood up to LeBron James in no less than Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. Lue's no-nonsense attitude could be exactly what this team needs. Maybe he'll be the first coach to properly get through to Simmons and Embiid, and then perhaps we can actually play some consistent basketball for once. Who knows? His team was built well around LeBron, and whilst it may seem obvious to build a good team around a star player, this past season it's shown that the Sixers struggle with this idea. I hope if Lue was appointed, he'd know exactly what this team needs and maximize the potential of our two stars. To finish, Lue knows what it takes to win. He's got a ring. Of course he does. He experienced it as a player and as a coach. He saw firsthand what was needed to keep the likes of Kobe and Shaq locked in all season, two huge personalities. And he saw that from his time at the Lakers. I'm going to have to get this in, but this is, of course, during his time at the Lakers. This is where Allen Iverson, the 6-foot guard from Georgetown, famously stepped over him, had to fit it in somewhere. He knows how to win in the modern NBA. Not like Brett Brown, who still thinks he can play basketball that won titles for the Spurs in 1999. He knows how to put players in the positions to win and can make the necessary adjustments to get favorable matchups. We saw in the playoffs, Brett just gets out-coached because he doesn't do exactly that. If the rumors are true as well that he brings Chauncey Billups with him as assistant, I'd love to see what they can do with Simmons. I think that would just be fantastic to have a Hall of Fame level guy work with him one-on-one for the whole 82-game season. I mean, who wouldn't be curious to see what happens with that? But yeah, is Lue my first choice? No. But if he's announced imminently, which it looks like he will be, then I'm going to back the guy. I mean, I wouldn't begrudge this appointment at all. So that's all for part 1 of assessing the 76ers coaching options. Be sure to check out part 2, which will drop sometime tomorrow. But in this video, I will also reveal my number 1 pick to be the new head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. You don't want to miss it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow.